Today we will look at the scrape commands. We have 5 different scrape commands, or better functions. It's scrape element attribute, scrape list elements attribute, and then the generic XPath parser. Before you watch this video, I highly recommend that you already watched video 15, where I cover frames and iframes, and where I also cover the selectors X and Z. So I will not go into those details, so you should know what the difference is between X and Z as pre-selectors and how iframes and frames are handled. So now the biggest difference between scrape element and scrape list elements is scrape element will return just one result, so your XPath expression should be unique, which means only one match on the page or within the page and all the frames and iframes, depending on if you use X or Z or if you have a frame or iframe pre-selected. And the scrape list elements command will return all results from the whole page or from the whole page and all frames and iframes, depending on the pre-selector you use. So that being said, scrape element and scrape list elements will always return text content. Text content means the text of an element, so the text you actually see on the screen. If we look at that stuff here, as in this example, the input text, I have a bike, or from the select box here, it's Volvo, Saab, Mercedes, Audi. That are all text contents. It's a text content thing. So there's one thing that you also should research and understand. When you extract, or when you want to extract text and you use XPath expressions, there are 2 ways to select the text from an element. You can use text content and you can use inner text. So the scrape element and scrape element attribute function uses text content. It does not use inner text. So it could be, depending on the configuration and formatting of that site, that text content will not give you the right text formatting in terms of line feed and other stuff. So sometimes it helps if the result you get is not formatted in the way you want it to be formatted. You can try inner text instead. The way to do that is you, instead of scrape element or scrape list elements, you use one of the attribute functions, like scrape element attribute and scrape list elements attribute, because there you can, as an attribute, specify inner text or text content. That would be the same like in the scrape element and scrape list elements function. Those 2, scrape element and scrape list elements function, are just pre-configured to use text content as the attribute to select and extract. So the scrape element attribute function can do pretty much the same when you specify text content or inner text as the attribute to use. So those commands are just more flexible, because then you can also specify other attributes like inner HTML or whatever attribute of an element you want to extract, right? Of course, as I said, XPath is very important, so you also should have watched the XPath free tutorial video series and maybe also do some additional research and tutorials about XPath in general, because it's important to understand how that HTML structure works, so you can write better XPath expressions and get what you actually want. So, that's basically already it, right? So scrape element and scrape list elements extract text content. If you need other attributes, you have to use one of the scrape element attribute or scrape list elements attribute functions, and you specify the attribute you want to extract, right? As I said, scrape element and list and element attribute only return one result. So you can see that here in this example, when we run that, it will return the text content of that element, Volvo Saab Mercedes Audi, right? Even though we have one element on that page. If we move to that second test page here and run that element count command, we have 3. If I run scrape element here, it will give you a warning that you have multiple XPath expression matches, which means that it's not unique, your expression, and it will just return Volvo 1, right? So when we extract list elements here, like in this case, it will give you the whole list, like Volvo 1, Volvo 2, sub 2, and so on, right? And oh yeah, one important thing here as well, the order of the data that is extracted when you use frames and iframes. And I think I covered that in that previous iframe frames video, just to reiterate that and make this very clear. The order the data is extracted, it when you use X, right, the pre-qualifier X instead of set, or you don't use anything, then it will default to X. We'll look into frames and iframes. So if you, and this text page has one iframe, and we look at the page source code, there's one select element here, another select element here, and then it has an iframe, which, inspect source code, which also has a select element here, and just that one. So, that test page 2 actually has 3 select elements. First one at the top, one that comes from that iframe, and another one at the bottom, right? So when we look at the data we get from that scrape list elements function, it extracts all 3 select elements, but the order it extracts them is not the order of the elements as you see them on the page. Because here's Volvo 1, then you see Volvo Saab Mercedes Audi from that iframe, and then you see at the bottom Volvo 2 Saab 2. If you look at the result here, it starts with Volvo 1, then the element at the bottom, Volvo 2 Saab 2, and then the data from the iframe. The reason for that is that it will process the main page first and give you all the elements from the main page. Then it will go into the frames one after the other. It starts with iframes first iframe, second iframe, third iframe, and so on. And then it looks at frames, first frame, second frame, and so on, right? So, as I mentioned in that frames and iframes video, on pages where you have a lot of frames and iframes and they load other stuff, you have to be very careful what you do. If you just don't look at that and just use X as qualifier and kind of like look at everything, it could screw up your results, right? Or the function could take a while, because if it scans through 50 iframes and stuff like that on crazy pages, it could be problematic, right? So sometimes it's better to select the right frame or iframe manually, use that pre-qualifier set and extract just the data you want. That's more accurate most of the time and also faster. So please be aware of that, and also the order of how the data is extracted, or how you get the data from the page, right? The order of the elements. So that's because that might sometimes confuse people too. Okay, so the generic XPath parser is you can fill that function with any input data you have, right? So you could have HTML in a variable, whatever you want to do. You could type HTML code here, or you can of course also use ExBrowser document text
which just means extract the HTML code from the currently loaded page and use that to run expat commands against that page, right? It's kind of similar to how the regular scrape element and scrape element attribute commands work, because they also use an expat parser in the background. The difference is that ExBrowser document text, of course, does not extract the HTML code of frames and iframes, so the results are kind of similar to when you use the set qualifier here, but you're a bit more flexible here with that generic expat parser. So you can specify the expat expression. Here you do not have to use X or set, and you can't, right? Because this will just look at that HTML text that you give to that function. So it's not looking at the browser directly itself. You can specify an attribute, and you can turn on or turn off remove missing. How to explain that the best? If you have empty results for example, you extract, let's take a look at an example here. So this one here, the select box, right? The second one, right, has a Volvo 2 and SAP 2 as options. So for example, when you extract that, you have two results. You have Volvo 2 and SAP 2. And when you want to put them into a table, you will have two table entries, right? So let's assume one of those entries is empty, like there's no text here. I mean, it doesn't make that much sense for a select element, but for tables and other stuff, it could be that, or you have you have 10 HTML links on a page, like an R record, an R element, an A element with HTML links and some text, and only 5 of those links have text, and the others only have that link, for example, right? The regular commands, when you run them, they will, and you specify text, they will only extract the text, and you have 5 results. So it means when you send it to a table, you have 5 entries in that table. If for whatever reason you need 10, and you also want to get like the empty results, so you have like 3 text, then 2 empty, then another 4 text, and so on, then you can use that generic expat parser and turn remove missing to false. That means that when the expat expression returns 10 results, it will give you 10 entries into your table, and will just also extract the empty entries as empty entries. So this is for very specific use cases. Most of the time this is not really needed, just an additional tool in your toolbox. So when you want to extract data and the count of the element does not match what you're looking for, because there are empty elements, or better, not elements, but empty attributes that you want to extract, and you need to put it into a table, and the records have to match, right? So you extract the URLs of that A element, and you want that text. And you want in one row you have the URL, and the other row you have the text. But if only half of the URLs have text, then you would have mismatch in your table, right? So you need to extract the empty elements as empty and have an empty cell in your table then afterwards. Hope that makes sense. At least that's the tool or the command you can use for this. But as I said, if you have no idea what I'm talking about right now, just ignore that for the moment. You will know when you have a coding challenge where this is needed, where results, and you want mainly for putting it into tables actually, right? Or in lists, and count of attributes that you extract needs to match. So, and when that's not the case, then you can use that generic expat parser and play around with that remove missing feature here. That's mainly the purpose of that option that you have. So that's it for now. As with all the training videos, if something is unclear or you have questions, write it down. open a support ticket, or better, wait for the tutorial or training webinars that I also run from time to time, where you can ask those questions live or send them in, and then I will go through all the questions and answer all the stuff for you. Okay, that's it for today. Thanks a lot. Have a nice day.